our deepest condolences on behalf of the entire city of Dublin and our community to the city of Westerville, to the Westerville Police Department, and most especially to the family and friends of Officer Eric Yoring and Anthony Morelli. These two fine men, two of the best in the Westerville Police Department, according to the Chief of Police, Joe Morbitzer, were senselessly and purposefully gunned down doing their jobs on Saturday morning. This is a tragedy that extends across all of our borders, because these two fine individuals, like our own fine police officers here protecting us, were just simply protecting their community. And in their sense of duty and honor, it does not stop at the city limits. So when any of us travel through Westerville, or any of us are members of the central Ohio community, we are all part of the same population, and they were here protecting us and doing their jobs in an everyday sort of way. And it is truly amazing. I've worked with a lot of police officers over the years, and when you think about what they face when they are, as I call it, the first one through the door, what they face on a daily basis is truly just an astounding thing of courage. And what happened this past weekend, it couldn't have been any more shocking. All they did was respond to a hang-up phone call. So you really can appreciate the danger that they, every day, these two fine men and our police officers, the danger that they are willing to step in front of on behalf of all of us every single day. And they go to work and they don't know if they're going to come home. So I would just like to take the time to express our deepest condolences to the city of Westerville and to their police community on behalf of those officers, and to also extend to our officers and to the Washington Township EMS and all of our first responders that are there every day going through that door first. I think it is appropriate for us to pause this evening and think in the quiet of our own hearts how much we appreciate what they do for us, but also don't stop there. When you see an officer, when you see EMS, when you see these people who are very quietly going about protecting our lives for us, take just a moment and stop and thank them for what they do whenever you have the opportunity, because you really don't ever know if that opportunity is going to present itself again. And I was truly proud and heartened. I was driving up Emerald Parkway shortly after all of that had happened, and I saw a caravan of our police cruisers heading out to 270, and I just knew that Dana and the chief had made the call and asked, any of you off-duty guys, is there anybody that can help? And here we were. There's a caravan of Dublin police cruisers, and I knew for sure they were headed to Westerville to help fill the hole that was left by this senseless situation. I'm very proud of our police and Chief O'Connell, who has just joined us. What you do for our community, we truly appreciate, and it is not possible for us to express how deeply we appreciate what you do every day. And it is those quiet Saturday mornings when you least expect it that the truly courageous show up and go to work, and they are the first ones through that door. So thank you very much, Dana. Thank you for mobilizing our staff and providing the support and the resource to our brothers and sisters over in Westerville that it seems like all we can do. It seems like it's not enough. It seems to be to fall so short, but what else can we do? But take the time to express our appreciation to all of you folks, what you do for us every single day, especially on those quiet Saturday mornings when nobody would expect something so horribly tragic like that to happen and so unnecessary. But we really appreciate what you do for us in the bottom of our hearts, and again, our condolences go out to the city of Westerville, and I'm sure we will have the opportunity over the coming days to continue to support them and to recognize these officers for what they do. But then it is also, and I'm sure for the officers, they would tell us, what can we do? And if we could talk to them now, they would say, stop and thank these first responders when you see them before it becomes too late. So thank you for what you do. And again, our thoughts and prayers go out to the city of Westerville. So Moving on, there were no individuals that signed in under the citizen comment portion of our agenda. Is there anyone that would like to make a comment on anything not on the agenda that did not have the opportunity to sign in? Seeing none, we will continue forward. The consent agenda, are there any council members who would like to have any of the 4 items currently listed on the consent agenda removed from the consent agenda?
I don't want to remove 0618, but I do have one brief question.
Okay.
Is it okay to proceed with that question? It says, the quote is for 1,757, and it describes it per unit hour.
Right.
So typically, when those guys show up, there's 3 or 4 of them. There's an equipment operator, there's someone that's maybe managing traffic or whatever, and then there's someone that might be doing handwork. So when that happens, did we ring up a bill of $5,271 an hour for those 3 people? Or
No. It's actually how we structure the bid. So in the bid schedule, within the bid itself, we provide different items, so labor, different pieces of equipment per hour, and then the contractor gives us a bid for that hourly rate for that item. And so when we do have a task for the contractor to complete, they go out and take a look at the proposed project. They come back with an estimate using those hourly rates, identifying the equipment and labor that they would use. We review that, discuss it with the contractor, approve it, and then they would go forward and complete the task.
So is this 1757 and for an average crew, and then it may go up or down depending on, do you need a bulldozer or do you need a bobcat?
And it's not even an average crew. It's actually the sum of all items on a 1 hour basis in that bid. So it's a means for us to be able to compare the bids if we got multiple bids.
Okay. That's my only question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I move that we
Mayor,
approve.
I've got one quick item. On the, and this is really minor, but I wanted to clarify in case it made its way around. On page 3 of the minutes, second paragraph, it says that I stated that it is due to Mr. Sullivan, this event runs so smoothly. I think what I said was that it's due in large part to Mr. Sullivan's efforts that this event. I know, again, that's a minor aside, but I don't want somebody over there thinking that we're ascribing all this efforts to just Dan. Thank you. If we could just make that correction.
Absolutely. Thank you,
Okay.
Mike. Hearing no other comments, Jane? Go
I
ahead.
just have one concerning the D5J, just a question, Jennifer. Not about these applicants, but I just wondered whether or not the city has, I know that this is a monetary savings when you get this versus the D5. Have we told most of our existing businesses that are in these sub-areas about the possibility of doing this? Do they all know about it?
Yes, yes, and we've told them all, work with economic development on that. We copy economic development too when we get applications. So, yeah,
Everybody knows?
we try to market that, kind of that incentive, so,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Anything else? I move that we approve the 4 items on the consent agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Judy?
Mr. Keenan? Vice Mayor Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. DeRosa?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Mrs. Fox?
Yes.
Ordinance 02-18. Judy?
Amending the annual appropriations for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2018.
Angel?
Good evening, members of council. I was not at the first reading of this ordinance, so I know that there were a couple of questions that were asked. So what I provided in this packet is a pretty detailed memo, and a lot of it is just a bunch of accounting procedures. But I'm willing to answer any questions that you may have after you've read this.
Questions from council? Chris?
I have one question. When we met as the Community Development Committee, we talked about Avery Muirfield Drive and possible reforestation. And I read, John asked the question when we were together last. Do you know where we are in making any determination on those roadway networks of reforestation of those areas?
I know that the ones that we feel that we can affect, we'll have a plan to go out and do that. But I think one of the key issues we faced when we were discussing that and researching is that we had some limitations within that right-of-way that we couldn't actually have an effect on unless we got the cooperation of the landowner. And if we were to spend any funding out of tree fund or otherwise, we'd probably have to come back with an amendment from you regarding any use of those funds on, other than public property. So we'll continue to work that and come up with a plan, but I think the key thing is we want to continue to work with certain residents to see if we can try to get a little bit more, a few more trees out there.
I think what we're hoping to do too is since most of these buffers along our roads are 20 years old, I think we need a comprehensive sort of study to take a total look at the city and start replacing those or figuring out a sequential system to replace all those design elements and buffers. So I think it's, one of the initiatives, something we're going to maybe talk about at the retreat and see if we can start looking at that.
Yeah, I know that's a great point. I know our forestry crew, I think the last numbers I got, they're planting something like 1,000 trees a year. So it's a big number of trees as it relates primarily to street tree program. But this is typically included in that, in those areas that we know we can affect that are in the public right of way that we have influence on and can actually do these. So I think it's just where we get into these situations where the intent was to have that, but yet it's on private property. Therein lies the tougher part. So we just got to do a little bit more work on that at staff level and come back to you.
Because I know we looked at
do
it
that.
to doing it a beautification award possibility too.
Those kinds of things can work.
Might allow us to
Yep.
help accomplish that in an area that we can't use the
That's a-
other kind of public funds.
It's a great point. That's good use of those funds.
I'm sorry, are you finished?
No, go ahead.
I have one other question. There is in section 3 of this transfer, there's $605,200. And it says, for additional costs associated with the North High Street widening project. I apologize, I didn't pick this up when I read it before. Is that an over budget, or did the
It was
project
a
go?
change order that came through on the project for utility relocation.
Okay. My last comment about this is, and I just want us to make it, I don't have any intention of changing it in this, but just to make us aware that, we removed that 25% that would go to Parkland and all of it going to be available to capital improvements projects. We changed that legislation maybe a year or so ago. And I just want to make sure that we are still looking at Parkland. Before, our Parkland fund would build up to the point where we would look at that number and be like, wow, we could do something really great in terms of parks in this community. And I think maybe that's a reason why we've done so many great parks projects, because the balance was there. And it's a little more difficult to do that now, because now you got to peel money back out of something to contribute to those same park things. So I just want to keep it on the forefront of our minds, keep cognizant that we need to be setting aside significant dollars for parklands, because that's how we got the great park system that we have.
Just as a point of clarification, what got changed was simply, prior to our general fund balance policy getting approved by council, we didn't have any mechanism to transfer money formally when the fund balance got above a certain amount. So in what council approved, anything above 75%, we take 25% of that, and what we propose and what's part of the policy is that would go to the capital improvement tax fund. So nothing changed on that. We still have our allocation of the inside millage that goes to the parkland, that gets split between the parkland acquisition and the capital fund. So I just wanted to make sure nothing with the general fund balance policy.
No, just the
changed
transfer
that.
portion. When we did those transfers, a portion would go to Parkland and a portion would be available for other things.
Is part of our general fund transfer?
I believe so. Or was that in our capital?
That's our inside millage. So that distribution has been tinkered with over time. It's been the way it currently is for the past, I believe, 10-ish years. And I can pull that up here.
And within the capital budget, we have the Parkland Acquisition Fund, correct? Which we've always continued to put the same amount of money into that fund.
It's a separate fund.
Right.
So Parkland Acquisition, as part of our annual capital budget, we do take $600,000 from our capital improvement tax fund and transfer it to the Parkland Acquisition Fund. So the Parkland Acquisition Fund itself gets $600,000 from the capital fund, as well as its allocation of the inside millage that council has determined should be credited to the Parkland Acquisition.
And that fund is where we do focus, and that has been the tradition of acquiring parkland out of that fund. And that fund has actually, at staff level, we have been thinking about that quite a bit the last year in looking at opportunities in that some of the funding that we've been paying towards the metro parks will be, that debt will be rolling off, and that payment towards that has been coming out of that fund. So in reality, there will be some capacity that you haven't experienced in the last several years becoming available, and so therefore, to your point, it's a great point you make, we need to be leaning forward on those opportunities, because we're in a better position now to pursue those than we might have been in the last couple of years, so I hope that helps. But
Yep,
but
I'll have
but
to,
you're
I'll
spot
pull up
on.
that
You're-
legislation out.
Yeah.
But yes, I just wanted to make sure that when we're doing these transfers, we're cognizant of that. That's all I have.
Kathy?
Angel, I had a question about, I think, the very end of your memo where it talks about included in the CIP is a $1 million transfer in the first year. Is that a mathematical calculation, and why only in the first year?
Well, what we do, when we're putting together the CIP, we are estimating the resources that are going to be available to fund each year of those. So obviously, the upcoming year, so when we go through this exercise in the next couple of months, we will make an estimate of what revenues will be available next year to pay for our capital projects. So when we were doing this, knowing where our fund balance was, our general fund balance was, we estimated that we would have $1 million that we would be able to transfer in as part of our general fund balance policy. So we're always going to be conservative on that. And to further our conservative planning, we don't make an assumption that the years 2 through 5, that there is going to be anything available in the general fund. Because to the extent that it's not available, then we potentially are in a deficit if everything else stayed the same in our capital budget. So we make a reasonable estimate in the summertime as to what we think we're going to be able to transfer from the capital fund, should council decide to transfer from the capital fund, or transfer from the general fund to the capital. Of course, we included language in the general fund policy that should council decide to deviate or not do the transfer at all, or transfer it to another fund, that's obviously an option. We would want to have that conversation as part of the capital budget, because if you take that $1 million, whatever the actual number becomes at year end, out, it definitely changes the funding level of the capital program.
Yeah, it looks like at the end of that 5 years, you have a surplus of about 108,000 without that. So
Right.
this is an appropriation, but it isn't an actual movement of those funds. Is that a correct statement?
This actually is the movement of the 25% above 75%, so the million, the 1,000,007, that's going to be transferred. What is used, the $1 million that you saw in the slides was just an estimate at that time. So in terms of our budgetary process, when council approves the capital budget, there really isn't any dollars appropriated at that point in time. That all comes when we bring for council consideration in December the appropriation ordinance. That's what actually appropriates the money and gets it from one place to another. In this case, we don't know our ending fund balance till after December 31st. So the meetings have taken place. We don't know that dollar amount at your last meeting of the year, which is why we come through, at the early part of January or February and ask for that transfer.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So once that money's into Parkland Acquisition Fund, is there a mechanism to move it back out? Is it encumbered?
In the capital fund.
It's encumbered.
It's not encumbered, so it gets earmarked for any of the projects that council approved as part of the CIP.
But if we build a surplus up in Parkland Acquisition, the question is, can it be moved back to general fund?
So, right, if council were to make a decision to transfer money into the Parkland Acquisition Fund.
We can do that.
You can do that, but
It's always within our.
transfer it back out.
It's within our purview, yeah, but
Right.
it's not something we have ever done or we really
Correct.
want to do. historically, so, okay, thank you.
My only question is, in changing and going and using the 25% above, that we would normally have not done, and moving it to capital improvements. My concern is that I've noticed that and I wasn't here during the early operating budget acceptance, but maintenance for instance, like parklands and streetscapes and all of that. I know that we've allotted money for capital improvements, but I don't see, in looking back, I didn't see much of an increase in manpower and that sort of thing. So I guess I'm only raising a little concern as we add these places like Bridge Park and all that, are we actually able to afford the extra manpower it takes to maintain?
From an operational perspective, we always look at our, I'll use your word, manpower or staffing to support any new projects coming on. We do this in a balance of looking at full-time staff versus seasonal staff versus contract services. So, as we anticipate those maintenance responsibilities transferring to the city after construction or what have you, we look forward on that relative to our operating budget and forecast that. There was some significant dollars put into this year's budget to reflect increased maintenance. I think it was relative to the interchange. Some of that will transition over to us and so forth. So a lot of that, I anticipate being contractual services, a significant part of that. And to the extent that I think we can do contractual services, we'll do that balanced against bringing on full-time staff. Not that that's always the answer. It's a combination and a balance of those things.
Any other questions? Judy?
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Rosa?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ordinance 03-18, Judy?
Authorizing the city manager to enter into an infrastructure agreement with Gage Crossing for the Gage Crossing development.
Paul?
Members of council, there's no new information to provide this evening on this ordinance. Staff recommends approval.
Questions from council? Hearing none. Judy?
Mr. Keenan? Yes. Mr. Rosa?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
First reading on ordinances, ordinance 04-18, Judy?
Amending the city income tax code to adopt section 718.8 through 718.95 of the Ohio Revised Code and declaring an emergency.
Faye, good evening.
I think Jennifer's going to start.
I think we
Jen?
need an introduction.
I'll introduce it.
Thank
There you
you.
go. Jennifer?
Good evening, council members. House Bill 49, the state's biennial appropriations bill, included a rider that creates a scheme of centralized municipal net profit tax collection to be administered by the State Department of Taxation. House Bill 49 allows any payer of net profit tax to opt in to centralized collection. This results in a state takeover of all administrative functions related to the net profit tax for these businesses, including the collection of tax payments and requests for refund. The state also takes a fee of 0.5% of net profit tax revenue it collects for administrative costs and rations the disbursement of tax revenues to cities. In addition, House Bill 49 also included a throwback rule, the elimination of the throwback rule, which apportions income from sales of goods to the place from which the goods shipped, if the seller doesn't have an address in the place where delivery is made. Recognizing that it can't directly impose the system upon municipalities, the state instead adopted a requirement for cities to pass ordinances adopting the centralized collection provisions or risk losing their income tax authority. Originally, the deadline to adopt these provisions was January 31st. However, the city of Dublin has joined over 150 other municipalities represented by Frost Brown Todd to challenge House Bill 49 municipal net profit tax provisions by filing a lawsuit with Franklin County Common Pleas Court. A hearing on the city's preliminary injunction request was held today, and is continuing into tomorrow. This legislation before you tonight is being introduced to second reading and passage by emergency on February 26th. And I want to go into a little detail on why we're requesting the emergency. It's imperative that we adopt the legislation immediately if the preliminary injunction request isn't granted. Otherwise, we risk claims from taxpayers for refunds, along with potential arguments from the state that we don't have the authority to tax without legislation in place. The legislation before council tonight is based on a recommended draft from FBT that other cities are adopting throughout the state with the emergency language included. If the preliminary injunction is granted, we will pull this legislation from the February 26th agenda. Additionally, if the judge provides a longer period of time for adopting legislation, we'll remove the emergency legislation request. The ordinance expressly reserves the city's right to continue to challenge the constitutionality of House Bill 49. So staff will bring this forward on February 26th, again, only if the preliminary injunction is not granted. The finance director and I are happy to respond to questions, and Faye Gibson and Kevin Robinson, who is actually a witness today, are available to answer questions as well. Thank you.
Questions from council?
I appreciate the emergency nature of this, that this definitely meets the benchmark of we can't do the things that we need to do to keep our community safe if we can't fund those things to do. So thank you for that great explanation, and it certainly crosses or meets the threshold to define emergency.
Okay, we will hope for a positive outcome and see you back on February the 26th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I will make a motion that we treat the next 16 ordinances, which are all acquisition of easements for the sanitary sewer extension to areas 11A and 11B. This extension policy that we visited, I believe, earlier last year. I move that we waive the council rules of order to discuss ordinances 0518 through 2018 together. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Judy?
Mr. Rosa?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Rayner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Mr. Keenan?
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Rose?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes. So Judy, if you could maybe just read the names and the addresses of all of the property owners, please. I'm sorry. That's fine.
William and Joan Gomez, Scott and Renee Casa, Mark and Jennifer Crabtree, Jason Overby, Wolfgang and Karen Dorschlag, Hassan and Bridget Ayub, Patrick McMonigal, Dorothy Mans, Amy Lawrence, Jacob and Denise Wallenmeyer, Rochelle Veneri, also known as Rochelle Rogers, Missy Walters, Shirley Walters, trustee, Todd and Elizabeth Brewster.
Okay. You skipped Dorothy Mann, which is, so she's at 7600 Dublin Road and 7570 Dublin.
Yeah, and I just named her one.
She's 12 and 16. Okay. Paul?
Members of council, on December 7th of 2015, you adopted a policy regarding water and sanitary sewer utility extensions to areas that do not currently have access to these public services. As part of that policy, a 15-year conceptual plan for extending water and sewer lines was developed throughout the city, within the city limits. You have before you this evening the easements necessary for the first of those projects, which is the sanitary sewer extension, areas 11A and 11B, which is the first of that 15-year conceptual plan. You'll see on the location map, but generally speaking, it's an area north of Brand Road, east of Dublin Road, and extends along Bel Air Avenue, Bel Air Court, Limerick Lane, and then also some parcels along Dublin Road. The sewer extension itself will be an 8-inch sanitary sewer extension in all cases along those streets. The project has the potential of serving 29 existing parcels, of which 26 of those parcels have existing home sewage treatment systems. The project requires easements from the property owners within the area for the extension of these services, particularly along Dublin Road, Limerick Lane, Bel Air Court, and Bel Air Avenue. The city has participated in good faith negotiations with all of these property owners and has come to mutually agreeable terms for them to donate the necessary easements at no cost to the city. You'll see in the staff report that we do list those property owners. There are 14 different owners for 16 different parcels. So we have 2 individuals who own 2 separate parcels, and those parcels are identified in the staff report. This is the first reading this evening. Staff recommends adoption at the second reading and public hearing on February 26th. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions from council?
I have a question just about the sewer hookups. Are there more partials that aren't hooking up of the ones that the sewer is running by? Are there people, can people decide to hook up or not hook up, or what's the policy? I'm just curious.
We are not forcing connection at this time. At the time that there's on-lot system would fail, we would then work with the Franklin County Board of Health on connection to our system. But we do have several individuals who do want a more immediate connection once this improvement's in.
But once the improvement's in, there'll still be some that would not have hooked up, right?
That's correct.
Right. And then they pay for the hookup from the street to the house?
Correct.
Is that how that, and does the city share in any of that expense?
We do not. We only provide the tap into the line itself. They really have 3 different costs on their part. That would be the service line itself, the tap fees, and then the ongoing maintenance.
Okay. And is there an average for that? It just depends on how much distance there is from the street to the, I'm just curious.
No, generally it's a same-day connection. Once the service line's installed, they work with a contractor or a plumber that would provide that service line on their property. They would, again, work with that contractor, pay for that on their own. Okay. But they would have a layout for that so that wherever their existing system is, that service line would be pretty close to where that location is so that it would be somewhat of a seamless connection.
Okay.
And the policy does call for an incentive for those property owners that connect within 2 years of the services being available to them. And the incentive is that we waive 50% of the Dublin tap fee charges, and that's provided to encourage those folks to connect.
What's the tap fee charges? Do you know?
Do you know those off the top of your head?
75?
Yeah, around just short of $2,000 for the Dublin portion.
Yeah, there's Dublin and then there's Columbus.
City of
We don't
Columbus.
have the ability to waive Columbus fees, obviously, so we did work in the policy the ability to waive a portion of the Dublin fee
Okay, so they'll save $1,000 if they tap in before.
within 2
2
years of them having noticed that the utility is available to connect to.
Okay, thank you.
My recollection was that when the system fails, there's no longer operable or doesn't meet the county requirements, they then must connect.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
But
it is.
I know when we went through the whole process that it was about, we didn't want to force people who just put in a new system or a system that may have a 5-year life or a 10-year life. So we were very, very flexible with that. And it's also noteworthy, nobody does this. This is a one-of-a-kind. Council basically thought it was very important that we do this for the health, safety, welfare of our residents, for our streamways, waterways, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of like the sidewalk thing. This is really very unusual. I think Indian Run was one of the first ones that we had accomplished, and 29 homeowners up there?
Correct.
We spent the better part of $1 million, $1.5 million running the line. And as I recall, it was somewhere between anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 to hook up from the street to the actual house, depending on. It also enhances property values, and I believe it's got to enhance property values. So.
Well, and I would encourage people, when this comes up from time to time, because we'll have these every year or so, there will be go read is the policy on our website, I would imagine?
I was just going to say, the policy is on the website, and I know we're actively engaging all these neighborhoods relative to, there is a prioritization plan for the deployment of this over time. It's a 15-year time frame is what council laid out. Council will review that every year, capital budget. Do you want to stay on schedule with that? Do you want to push it out? So, and there's also a mechanism by which residents can come forward and try to, for their lack of a better word, jockey position in that. If they have a lot of residents who are more excited about it, getting it than others, it's a pretty unique program, and it's comprehensive, but certainly we'll spend time with residents going through it with them, and we've done a lot of active engagement out there. I know, I think I saw too where we're continuing to work with Soil and Water on ongoing inspections on the HSTSs, or the on-site treatment, on-site treatment systems for homes, and evaluating those and their status. So people, priorities can shift over 15 years, so we'll.
And we build a lot of flexibility into the program, too. If there's construction projects, other road projects, other things that need to be done, pathway, I don't know, that we can actually alter the original plan that was put in place, knowing that we're going to have to tear things up anyway and go forward.
Correct.
The downside is we have a number of the streets where people were adamantly opposed to doing the connection, and we have a percentage of some kind that we have to meet of residents. Don't they have to agree
In order to move up
In order to
in
move
the,
up on
in order to move up on the?
Be right.
Right, exactly.
That's what I was alluding to. You could,
Reprioritize.
yeah, get better, a different position in the scheme of.
We have had this discussion for how many years, Dana? Many.
A long time.
A long
You know what,
time.
the discussion went on for a long, long time, but at the end of the day, when we came up with the policy that we passed, there was not one person that stood up and said, that's not reasonable.
Right.
And it was really astounding that we got through all of that and accommodated everybody's different concerns.
That's right.
At the end of the day, really, it was like a Rubik's Cube. Every time you tried to fix one person's problem, you created a problem with somebody else. But at the end of the day, this body came up with the solution, and the staff, where every single person's concern was met.
So-
And so as this comes up, I would encourage anybody that doesn't have this, that's wondering where they are, go to the website. You'll see where you are, and you'll see how to get with your neighbors and move up on the schedule if you want to. And the city pays, there's no assessment for the main lines, which is, like Mike's saying, really extraordinary.
Ordinary. I see this is just south of our neighbors at Amberley and up that way.
Correct.
I presume that whatever we did to clean things up with the sewer lines back in the day won't happen here?
No, and this is actually,
You know
the
what I'm
green
talking
line's
about.
actually a 36-inch that was lined as part of that incident. So yes, that is in good working order. So,
One thing I would caveat when we talk about reprioritizing is certainly that is a possibility, but now that I think about it, there could be some where reprioritization isn't possible because it has to flow somewhere. So we have to build two people before we can add them on the system. So sometimes they may, so I'm looking at the Public Works folks, they're like, no, not really, Dana. I mean, it's got to, so, yeah, so anyway, so there is, there is that opportunity in some cases, but there are some very hard places to build to which have to be sequenced out. So I don't mean to state the obvious, but that's the obvious.
No, I appreciate that. I think that not understanding how the process is and being new to this, and a lot of residents ask those questions and talk about it. I was trying to get myself up to date here. Thank you.
Yeah, it was really a generous solution. It really was.
Yeah.
two final points with this project is we are marrying this up with a storm sewer improvement along Limerick Lane, so we are taking advantage of those economies, having two construction projects occur at once, so they'll be bid as one project. And lastly, I really did want to recognize Todd Garwick, senior civil engineer, for all the effort. He worked with all 16 property owners individually, or 14 property owners, to work through issues, logistics, concerns, explain the process, very painstakingly, but very patiently. And that is really what resulted in the donations of these easements.
Great. Anything else? All right, we will see you back on that issue on February the 26th.
Thank you.
Resolution 07-18, Judy?
Authorizing the city manager to execute a contract with the Franklin County Public Defender Commission for the defense of indigent defendants.
Dana?
Yes, good evening, members of council. So this resolution has to do with our constitutional duty as a city to provide indigent defendants a court-appointed counsel. Franklin County Public Defender's Office is willing to provide these services. We've had a history working with this commission in the past. Their costs have actually decreased 7.6% per case over 2017 for the proposed 2018 contract. Last year, the city spent about $2,573 in such cases. We're budgeted for about $2,800 this year. We'll see how that goes, but staff would recommend approval of this resolution to provide these services.
Questions from council? Judy?
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. DeRosa?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Resolution 08-18, Judy?
Authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with Rev 1 Ventures.
Colleen?
Good evening. Resolution 0818 is an agreement with Rev 1 Ventures for services provided for a new company and new technology creation. This is the city's providing matching funds for the Third Frontier Grant Funding Program. This is our 12th year that we're participating in this program. The state of Ohio's Third Frontier Grant Program is the primary statewide funding mechanism to support new companies and technologies, and Rev 1 Ventures is designated as the lead agency in Central Ohio responsible for administering the grant. Council has approved $200,000 in the city's operating budget this year as the local match. To give you an example of some of the items in the agreement and services provided, they will facilitate and promote networks among Dublin entrepreneurs and tech startups. They provide assistance with funding and capital. They identify high-potential entrepreneurs. They provide training, mentoring. They have a presence at our entrepreneurial center with office space. And they have their 2017 annual report attached, so that provides you a little bit of data. And we do have Tom Walker here this evening, who is the president and CEO of Rev 1 Ventures, to answer any specific questions. I'll invite him up to the podium. And as you can see, the slide that is up right now just gives some fast facts about the program. Probably the one that I would like to point out the most is for the $2.2 million investment that Dublin has provided over the last 11 years. We have seen $73 million in investment come back to Dublin startup companies. And I'll turn it over to Tom, unless you have questions for me.
Any questions for Colleen? Over to Tom. Welcome, Tom.
Members of council, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. Mr. City Manager, always good to see you. We're proud of this program. The deal flow in Dublin continues to grow. We have some great success stories. I'll highlight two for you on both ends of the spectrum. On the raw startup side, a company called Healthy Roster that is close to 15 employees now, continuing to grow. I just saw their investor update last week, and the revenues continue to grow. It's an interesting opportunity. On the other end of the spectrum, a company that we've talked about before in front of council is UpDocs. You're probably familiar with them. They added over 40 jobs just in 2017. They also added north of 13 million of investment capital. They're also residents in Bridge Park, so that's a company that we're very proud of. So sort of both ends of the spectrum there in terms of what we like to see to grow. On an annual basis, we receive roughly 75 to 80 inquiries from the region, and our general stats are about 10% of those turn into what we call engaged companies. We invested through Rev 1 over $500,000 last year in Dublin companies, and they went on to raise just under $14 million. So it was 26 to 1 leverage last year. It's 60 to 1 leverage through the life of the program. So we're looking at about 166 jobs right now. I don't know, the average salary there is in the $60,000 to $70,000 a year range.
Fantastic. Questions from council? Kathy?
Yeah, first of all, congratulations. I mean, I think what your organization has done over the last decade is fantastic. And I
Thank
know
you.
you've had a lot to do with getting that, moving in that direction, so congratulations.
Thank you.
I just sort of had a couple questions. I know you cover a fairly large region. Could you share a little bit about how Dublin sort of stacks up compared to some other cities? And then sort of a second part question, as we look into 18, what are the things that you're seeing that we could do to make that, if you will, deal flow and activity even increase? So
Sure. Thank you for those questions. The second question will get me in trouble with staff.
That's all right, go ahead.
As we talk about creative projects. First question. So we serve a 15-county region in central Ohio. That designation is based on the Third Frontier program that Colleen mentioned. But the majority of our deal flow comes from Franklin County. And about 90% is Columbus-centric, and Dublin is the second largest in that region. So this is our second most active region by far. And in terms of the city commitment, it's on par with other communities that fund us, and it's certainly representative of the amount of deal flow that we do see from the region. In terms of 18, some of the things that we get excited about, as council hears projects related to OU and the growth of the Innovation District and things of that nature, that is going to attract a knowledge-based worker. Those are the types of people that we see the opportunities from. So innovation, high growth businesses. So we're excited about those kinds of relationships. We're also very excited about relationships like Ohio Health, which we have a strategic partnership with, but they have a unique culture in promoting innovation from within their base of doctors. So those kinds of opportunities generate, new IP, new innovations that can potentially grow in the region. We're also excited about what the future can hold with the deck and other new developments in the region to spur on startups and be an attraction factor for Dublin. We think that Dublin stands out and has some unique features as compared to Columbus and other regions. We can go in and find great pockets that we all love to visit, but if you are an entrepreneur that has a family and you are raising kids, you want to be in a community like Dublin. So I push on staff, and whenever we're meeting in our routine meetings, about what else can we do to attract. And obviously, those kinds of things take investment. That's where I get in trouble, so I'll just kind of stop right
So before I know other people have questions as well, so your thought about smart city and Internet of Things and opportunities for Dublin, the region, investments?
Well, I like to say those things aren't the future, they're here today. So, we have to act on those opportunities today, and Dublin does have a great opportunity in the corridor. I think you are, no pun intended, mobilized to sort of capitalize on that in a unique way, given the assets that are already here. But we can't wait on that to come. It's already here.
Any other questions from council?
Yeah,
Christina?
just really quickly, as you think about, startups and entrepreneurs and the spaces that they like to occupy as they're beginning to grow their businesses, do you find that we have enough usable space within the deck or within other areas through the city? Is that something that we need to be looking forward to? Is the space the right space? I know there's great access to technology there and certainly collaboration. But as we continue to want to sort of grow that innovative space, I just want to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to be looking forward to make sure we have adequate space for those folks.
It's a great question. So what attracts startups? Well, they love developments like the Bridge District, right? But they can't afford that. So you have to find areas in and around or easily accessible to areas like that. They're looking for walkability to literally coffee shops, restaurants, those kinds of things. So if there are roads that require driving to get to those places, it might as well be a moat with crocodiles and alligators. So you have to find areas that are just easily accessible. I think, I'm a huge fan of the deck. I think there is a future that involves the deck, and I think involves other kinds of spaces. Our region is rich, and when I say our region, Central Ohio is rich in co-working space. And co-working space is not necessarily synonymous with startups. It's a different kind of animal. So when we think about startups, it is a different kind of space. and there's all ways to tackle that, and we're having just terrific conversations with staff on those kinds of issues. Yeah.
So you've told us about the financial commitment, and you've told us about our schools being an asset, and that we have, some of the right ingredients in terms of space needs. Is there anything that you would say, if you had blank, it would move the needle significantly higher? Is there something do you have something that would fill that blank?
There's two areas that we're all in a battle for. Number one is talent, and number two is capital. The investment capital that these companies need, it's not bank dollars. These aren't bankable companies. And so whatever we can do to continue to attract and help grow investment funds, that's not an area we've visited a lot about in the past, but that is just a growing area. Every community that can say they have an investment vehicle, whether it's incentives for angel investors or the creation of a community investment fund, that is an attraction piece. That's key. And the other is talent. Just like we think about smart cities and technologies of the future, the workforce of the future and those gaps, that's here today. So some of the coding technologies and things of that nature, students are going to college, they're coming out of college, but they don't have the training to access those jobs, and they're having to go to yet additional skills training to access the kind of jobs that high-growth companies need. So things that we can do in this community to attract training camps, boot camps, certificate programs for the future workforce are really key.
It's funny that you would mention that, because the schools are, you've probably heard about the Emerald Campus and some of the STEM programs and things like that. But my question was largely, we as a city, so we can't necessarily provide talent. The schools are going to have to do that, and the educating bodies and those private investment dollars, we can't do a whole lot with that. But you think that we're doing all of the parts that we can do as a city?
Dublin has a lot of the right components. I mean, if you just think about the ordinances you passed, up to this one, it's things to improve the quality of life of the city, which is really important. But you can do things that are attraction-based. So you're a real estate owner, you can do things to property, and that, maybe it's zoning to attract a certain kind of company. Maybe it's zoning to attract training institutes, things of that nature that will help in the future.
Great, thank you, I appreciate the insight.
What you make me think of is we're thinking about rehabbing a area that was a office park area. It was one of our first office park zones. And when you said if there's not restaurants and places to walk to, it's as bad as a moat with alligators. And right now, the city is looking at rehabbing an entire area of our city to try to get that kind of synergy going, that kind of interest, entertainment for the new people. So it's a very good point. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Reinforces sort of where we're heading.
It's also a good point, John, to think about, as you said, to attract boot camps, some of that leased space that's sitting empty, 30%. That would be a perfect place, because we're talking about multi-use over there, walkability, restaurants, some affordable housing for young talent. It's a good that you mentioned that your needs, and I think it would be really important to be very specific about what your needs are as we're thinking about that Metro Blazer area, is a perfect place for young talent close to the center of town, close to walkable, and we have all the space available.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Tom. Appreciate you coming in. So I guess we're ready to vote, huh, Judy?
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan? Mr. Rosa?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Resolution 09-18, Judy?
Authorizing the city manager to execute an intergovernmental agreement with the Franklin County Commissioners for the administration of wireless 911 government assistance funds.
Chief?
Good evening, members of council. Resolution 0918 will authorize the city manager to enter into a new intergovernmental agreement with the Franklin County Commissioners for the purpose of receiving funds from the Wireless 911 Governmental Assistance Fund, which funds us to answer wireless 911 phone calls. As you know, since 2006, we've entered into intergovernmental agreements with the Franklin County Commissioners for this purpose. The most recent agreement ended at the end of 2017. The new agreement will allow us to continue to receive these wireless 911 funds under a new plan developed by the 911 Planning Committee, which accommodates the reduction in funded public safety answering points to 4 in Franklin County. And our recommendation is to pass Resolution 0918.
Questions from council?
I just have one question. Is this a percentage of the breakdown? There's a chart here, Exhibit 1, talks about disbursements, it says Columbus 74.2, Dublin 6.3, so on and so forth. Is that just a percentage breakdown, or is that based on actual calls?
It's a percentage breakdown based on the volume of calls received by each PSAP.
So that number changes every year, or whenever it's compiled?
Well, this agreement will be for 1 year. It could change at the end of this for the next intergovernmental agreement, yes.
Good. It was more of a curiosity thing.
Not during the course of it.
Right. It's evaluated annually, but the numbers can fluctuate on an annual basis.
Well, it's calculated based on the length of the agreement.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Judy?
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Ms. DeRosa?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Resolution 10-18, Judy?
Appointing a member to an unexpired term on the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Chris?
Well, we thank you for your time. We held interviews. I think we interviewed 12 different individuals for our Planning and Zoning Commission. We have this spot that was vacated by Mrs. DeRosa that we will be filling, and we'll have another spot that will fill come March 1st of an expired term. So we will be appointing Christina Kennedy to this position, and we will make the next appointment probably at our next meeting. So thank you for your time. We'll look forward to this appointment.
So that's a motion?
Get them
You
moving.
want to make,
That's
I'll
my
second the motion.
Okay. So this is just on Christina Kennedy's appointment?
Correct.
Judy?
Mayor Peterson?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. DeRosa?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Staff comments, Dana?
Well, and do you want to vote on the resolution? Were you just voting on the motion? I thought it was your intent just to fill in the name of the member, the amended, because the resolution was blank
We can do that. You want a second motion
Yeah.
to approve?
on the resolution.
And I'll so move.
Okay, so we've now amended the resolution to include the name,
Correct.
and now we're going to vote on passing that name.
Right.
I'll second his motion.
So let's vote again. I wonder if this is going to pass. Go ahead.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Ms. Fox?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. DeRosa?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Mayor Peterson?
Yes. Jane, staff.
Nothing this evening.
Thank you. Council committee reports, P and Z. Jane?
Well, I guess I just wanted to say that on this Thursday, we're going to be meeting to discuss changes, a workshop about changes to the Bridge Street Code. And this is something that I believe is going to have a lot of interest from people in the Historic District. And one of the recommendations that they're mentioning is to create a committee of stakeholders and of individuals. And I believe that it might be advantageous for us to give a lot of thought to how we go about deciding how these changes are going to be presented to the public. And I think it might be a good idea to reach out to the public, probably in a little wider and broader manner, so that more and more people get a chance to really take a look at these changes, because they're going to be significant. So I'm just recommending that we make sure that we have a lot of eyes on these changes, a lot of people's inputs, and really be intense about looking at the changes. So that's about it.
Okay. Is that it? Is that it, Jane? Yes. P&Z? Admin, Chris?
I know that you are all very much looking forward to our retreat, March 1st and 2nd. I, too, am anxiously awaiting to hear from all of you and your topics. I trust that you are working away at the items that you are bringing forth for our visioning, and we have our location. We are going to be meeting at the Muirfield Village Golf Club for that Thursday evening and Friday. It is a public meeting. We have cleared the road for anyone from the public that would like to attend is welcome to come and attend that meeting as well. So thank you for your hard work, and let's just keep working towards that. It's going to be a really exciting couple days, I think. So thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Community Development, John?
The Beautify Your Neighborhood grant applications, we're still waiting for when the city has those prepared. I suppose that's coming up fairly shortly for the winter ones. And we're going to, I suppose, also hear from the city staff on the corridor landscaping projects sometime in the future here. So we'll wait word from the staff and get on with the program. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Finance, Mike?
Just put on your radar, we have the Tax Incentive Review Council meeting, Dublin Housing Council meeting is scheduled for May 1st. Will be in council chambers, scheduled at 4 o'clock. It's noteworthy that the members will be myself as chair of finance, the chairperson of the Community Development Committee, we'll have a Franklin County Auditor representative, 2 Washington Township representatives, and representatives of each school district, Dublin City Schools, Tolles, Career and Technical Center, Hilliard City Schools, and Jonathan Alder local schools. So it's a ways away, but I wanted to put it on your radar so you knew it was coming. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Mike, when was the date for that again?
It's May 1st,
May 1st? Is there a time yet?
4 p.m.
4 p.m. here?
here, council chambers.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Public Services, Christina?
So I've obtained some potential meeting dates for this committee. However, I'm going to wait to get them on the calendar until after council retreat, as we'll be working on our priorities there. It doesn't make too much sense to do that before our retreat, so that'll be forthcoming.
How about the Dublin Friendship Association?
Yeah, so we met, John came, thanks for coming.
Oh.
I told him it was the most fun group that I meet with, and he now knows why. So you're all welcome to come and join us if you want to have some fun on a committee. We met actually with Tim Sword, who's the president of the Greater Columbus Sister Cities International. We talked a little bit with them about some collaboration opportunities in terms of events, working with the schools, how the schools take trips as part of touch points for their sister cities and potentially our friendship cities. Not a lot of the surrounding municipalities around Columbus know, but because they are a regional presence with regional presence for the Greater Columbus area, they have 10 sister city relationships, and we have access to each of those cities in terms of leveraging, touch points with them and cultural exchanges and business exchanges, which was pretty cool because I didn't know that either prior to meeting with Tim. There are definitely some areas where we, I think, can potentially partner with them. So Nancy and I are going to be working on setting up another meeting with Tim to do a little bit of some sort of strategic planning on where we can have some of those collaboration points. And we'll bring those recommendations back to both staff and to council for your consideration. So it's pretty exciting stuff. I'm really happy about it.
Great. Thank you, Christina. Chris Morpsey.
We held a regional meeting on the 30th at the rec center, and it was very well attended by many of those in our region from Plain City and Powell and Jerome Township and Marysville, and there were a number of entities there. It was a Northwest corridor meeting. It was well attended. Our engineering staff did a nice job of updating the projects that will be currently happening within that region that are partnered there. So that was a nice meeting that we had. And then Dana has also let me know that we may be receiving a seat on the executive committee. So I hopefully will have some information to bring back to you regarding that at our next meeting, but I've been in some communications with William Murdoch and those folks about what that might look like for us. So, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Logan Union Champaign County Regional Planning Commission, Kathy.
Nothing to report.
How about the US 33 Innovation Corridor Group?
Okay, that group met last Friday in Marysville, and both Jane and I were in attendance. It had been a few months that that group had last met, so a lot of the focus of the discussion was really on information sharing and getting folks up to date on the developments and planning projects that are going on the increasingly dynamic corridor. We spent a fair bit of time as a group talking about potential joint projects and cross-community activities that might give us the greatest collective impact. And we looked at a couple planning and technology updates. So Jane and I look forward to providing you with some updates, I think, as we go through this year on a couple joint planning projects. So stay tuned.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Dublin Arts Council, John.
Nothing, thank you, Mayor.
Dublin Board of Education, Christina.
We met last Wednesday, and we talked through the school's master plan. They're still putting that together. There is a meeting on the proposed new elementary school. That meeting is at Scioto High School on the 20th of this month at 6:30. We briefly talked about CNG vehicles and sort of a variety, a smattering of some other things as well. And that's it.
Great, thank you, Christina. Washington Township, Chief Eric, you got anything for the good of the order? All right. Council Roundtable. Jane?
Well, I don't have a lot to talk about, except I have a great big thank you to the police department. Being a new council member, I'm getting a lot of phone calls about all sorts of things. And I got a very interesting phone call from someone who was actually in Washington Township, but just on the border. And I reached out to the police department, and I got an amazing response back with stealth reports, visit to the family's home. I don't know that we've solved it all, but I will say that I was absolutely amazed at the comprehensive way you handled it, and I so appreciate that. So I just want to say
Just for
thank
the
you.
record, I want to make sure everyone knows stealth reports, she means stealth stat.
Stealth stat, whatever they
I just want
are.
to make sure, clarify that.
Stealth
I don't want
stat
the people
traffic.
thinking we're hiding in the bushes.
Is that right? Stealth stat traffic. Well, I did learn that 22,000 cars go down Dublin Road in front of my house in a 3-day period. So it is, yeah. So, but thank you for that. It's quite amazing. Officer Beam, I want to say thank you to him.
You know, it always astounds me. If you go to an HOA meeting, you could have 4 neighbors that want to just talk about something. The police will show up. They will show up, they will be informed, they will be professional, they will be responsive, and it is every single time that you ask them. I had up in John's neck of the woods, they have a road that's pretty highly traveled, and I went there for a meeting one evening, and the chief showed up. And even people, they maybe don't get the absolute answer that they want, but they will understand the answer that they are getting. And sometimes that's all you can do.
Right,
And the challenges that they face that we talked about earlier tonight, and then at the same time, they're dealing with traffic and
Right.
speeds and,
Right.
and managing it in really an extraordinary way.
It was very much so. So that's a big thank you to the whole force.
Kathy?
So maybe just a little follow-on to the entrepreneurial conversation we were having earlier tonight. So Vice Mayor Amherst Grooms and I had the pleasure of attending I guess it was the blue ribbon cutting ceremony of this organization called Brick House Blue, which is a co-working and very interesting meeting space that's now open in Bridge Park. And I think it's another example of sort of those entrepreneurial endeavors that are really taking place. So fantastic and a real interesting thing to look at if you get the chance. I think we're entering a really interesting business imagination, I guess, and reimagination going on here in Dublin, and it was exciting to see that play out. So that was a fun event. And I also took the opportunity to stop over and check out the new temporary Dublin library digs to see how that's going as we're making this move toward the new construction. So the library staff told me today I was over there around noon, that the traffic is continuing to build as the word gets out that they're open, so I'm sharing that word. As expected, I think one of the challenges is that the total number of materials that folks have used to been able to browse when they go into the library, just, that's just not possible necessarily in this temporary one. But staff said residents are really taking advantage of the service they have that, allows a resident user to put a request on hold and to pick that up. So they're encouraging that. And I can tell you there's plenty of parking, so that works. So good for them. So that's moving along.
Great.
So, thanks.
Thanks, Kathy. John?
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the annual Emerging Art Exhibition of Student Artwork is running now at the Dublin Arts Center, and it's really fantastic to see the level of talent that our young people really have. And they'll be running until the 23rd of February, and then in March is coming an interesting exhibit called The Spear of Magic and Other Visionary Objects, Extraordinary Images. And this is artist Mark Soapland. So another exciting visual entertainment for you and your family if you get the chance. So that'll be starting from March 6th, and it'll run through April the 20th. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Mike?
Memory escapes me, but did we talk about the Consul General from the Deputy Consul General?
That we met with, yeah.
We did. I wasn't sure because we've had a meeting in between, but I'll let you allude to that if you want to speak to it. But Greg and I met with the Deputy Consul General from Japan, came down on a visit, and we spent, Dana and myself and Nancy Richardson, probably the better part of an hour. And it was very informative. She was making her introductions, and they get back and forth here from time to time. We've really had a good relationship with the Consulate General based in Detroit, and it's a wonderful relationship and one that we encourage. You may want to expound on that later, but that's really all. I have one question. Kathy, was Jerome Township represented at the 33? Who was the representative, just for my own
Ron
benefit?
Rhodes.
I'm sorry?
Ron Rhodes.
Okay, thank you.
And Mark. Thank you. Thank you.
Christina?
Just a couple of really fast questions. So the joint session, that's A and B, ARB and P and Z, that's this Thursday?
Yes.
And that is covering the Bridge Street District Code Amendment piece that was in our information packet? That's the same thing you're talking about, yes?
Right.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if ARB is at Planning and Zoning. Is ARB? Okay. Yeah.
I think it's a joint?
Right.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I just wanted the clarification. And then on the Historic Dublin Design Guidelines update, do we have people already designated for that committee, or no?
Those folks by name are not designated yet, no.
No, okay. Thank you. That's all I had. Thanks.
Chris?
A couple things. In the items of interest, the sign code enforcement, thank you for doing that. I know that code enforcement is never a fun thing for anyone to do because those are never pleasant letters to open or conversations to begin. So I appreciate anyone who's willing to take up that difficult task. But it is important. We know what our vacancy rates are, and our vacancy rates to signage is certainly disproportionate. So thank you for taking up that difficult task. There is some conversations about the historic Dublin guidelines in here, and I'm hoping that we see more of that to council before it's fully baked. I hope that we get to see that before it's a thumbs up or thumbs down. I hope that we get to see that in a conversational manner. I wanted to highlight a couple great things going on in our community that have happened since we were together last. One is the Marriott Northwest had their grand reopening, and they have done a fabulous job, and it was a pleasure to get to be with them to celebrate that. Dana did an excellent job at the all-in meeting on the 25th, and it was really a nice time to be together and celebrate the things that our staff has accomplished. I had opportunity to go to the Ohio Realtor Association forecast lunch. Rachel Ray's not here tonight, but she attended as well, and they were really bullish on the real estate market for this coming year. It was very encouraging to hear. It was interesting because it was followed a few days later by the Chamber Economic Forecast Breakfast, and that was a very different message. Both of them were positive, but for very different reasons. So it's good to go and hear different perspectives of why they think their economic forecast is positive. The Brickhouse Blue, it's interesting to see for the Brickhouse Blue ribbon cutting that we saw the return on investment that the governmental sector is doing on these startup kind of things, and to see the private industry kind of wanting to capitalize on being able to house some of those services too, to benefit from that synergy and other things going on. So that was certainly nice. And we have another new business in town that did a grand opening. It's a place called The Range. It was a little near and dear to my heart because it was golf related. But they had an event Saturday night, a grand reopening, and it's really exciting to see some of these older facilities. This is in those glass buildings that abut 270 off of Tuller. And it's kind of an older facility that we might not think would be attractive to people. But I continue to go to these things and be stunned by what they can do in the build out of the interiors. That the exterior of the buildings can be very dated or look like they could use some serious rehab kind of work. But inside, once you walk in that door, they have a great feel, so the creativity is... So the last thing I have to say, and I don't know what other format to do it in other than this, you all received the same email I did. There was a phone call that came in, and it was addressed to me, and it was about safety along Highland Croy, and it was about some concerns in the engineering department within our city, and there was a number of concerns that this caller verbalized, I think, to one of our clerk staff, and they did their best to reiterate that to us. This is my only format to communicate with you. So I need more information. If I can take up the baton and start addressing some of your concerns, I have questions and I need to know more about what it is that you would like me to look at. So it was an anonymous call. This is my only format to communicate. So please reach out again, and I promise to keep your name confidential if it's something that's a concern for you. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Just a couple quick things. I'd like to just echo Mike's comments about the Deputy Consul General that came down. She was very engaging, charming. Her involvement with the JASCO organization and the Japanese American community that resides here in Dublin, she's very committed. We welcomed her back as often as she could return. Mr. Hidaka and all of that portion of our community is such a rich part of Dublin, and she was very engaged. I think she's going to be coming back. She's going to come down to the tournament and whatnot. So we look forward to extending a hand to her as we go into the future. And on one final note, Vice Mayor Grooms had told me that Chai Weber is feeling a little bit under the weather. I just wanted to let him know and let his family know that our thoughts and prayers go out to Chai. He is an absolute pillar of this community and one of our forefathers, and I look very much forward to seeing him at the St. Patrick's Day Parade. So Chai, get better soon, and I will see you there on March the 10th? March the 10th. So with that, we are adjourned.